Everyone. Good morning. Good morning, Iranse. Iranse, tell us a little bit about the Congress. How many people you're expecting? How many days? When? Where? And what topics are we expecting to be covered?
Thank you, Pedro. Good morning, everyone. And this Congress and it's necessary start this talk. Say thank you, Pedro, to opportunity to start this activity in Goiânia, because the first Congress, the Trail Congress, it's very important to us. Start in our state, they stay in the medium of our country. Goiânia be 150 kilometers of Brasilia, the federal capital, and the Congress you go start in May 25 in Goiânia, and a specific place in the Oscar Niemeyer Center, Cultural Center is a important building in the capital, and in this place you go offer to participate different activities, lectures with experts, and in the many regions of our country and the other countries too. Our expectancy it's more or less 700 people participate with us. I remember in the last account more than 600 already registered, and then we think in this event you go very good to show to authorities and trail lovers an opportunity to think about the trails, the potential economic and the touristic potential of trails. In our regions, we have a big trails, the Caminho dos Goiáses or Goiás Trail, and that connect different ways, for example, Caminho de Cora or Cora Corolinas Way, with Pedro talk before. And in this Congress, our expectancy to this Congress, it's open the opportunity to different peoples and different segments look to trail with opportunity, in special the area of tourism and economic. And I enjoy the moment to invite you and this team to stay with us in this Congress between 25 and 29 of May. And in activities, presential activities, and in the forum, and in practical activities, because our program have activities out the building in the trials, in specific trials around of Goiânia. Okay, thank you to opportunity, and if you have other question about the Congress, I have a pleasure to request to you.
Thank you, Iranse. Has already, as Iranse mentioned, 750 people who have signed up for it, and we're still almost 2 months away from the Congress. It's going to be a mix of government, trail-related businesses, and volunteers, as well as trail users. both bike and hiking, as well as some paddling, people from the paddling community and horse riding community. We are therefore going to cover in the Congress many different topics, from fundraising um, to hiking itself, how to prepare for a long distance trail, what equipment should one buy or use. Also, we're going to cover topics of governance, of topics of trail maintenance, trail signage, so on and so forth. It's going to be very comprehensive. But one of the topics that is more directly linked to this World Trails Network community is the idea of starting out a movement to coordinate all the trail initiatives around the Americas. And much like Europe, begin to set up a true network of Pan-American trails. We are aware that this is a distant dream, but we're also aware that the distance will only begin to be covered when we begin to walk towards the end. So the proposal we have now and that we're going to put on the Congress is that we start it right now. I have a small presentation here that I'd like to share with you. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it works. Can you all see it?
Yes.
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 Yes,
all right.
Pedro.
So the concept of having
Pedro.
Pan-American route is not new. We already have a Pan-American highway, which is nothing more than a trail for cars. So to dream of having a hiking trail, a Pan-American hiking trail, it's not really a new idea. And as I will strive to show you, it is not even that far away from happening. As you all know, the idea of long distance trails first appeared with the Appalachian Trail in 1921 with Benton Mackay, although just yesterday Nat proved to me that it's even earlier than that, as he will probably tell all of you guys pretty soon. It's from 1916, if I'm not wrong. And as every good idea, it soon spread out and spread out to the other side of the United States, and so 11 years later, we would have the first movements to set up a Pacific Crest Trail. From there, it crossed the ocean to Europe, more precisely to Hungary, where in 1938 the first national European trail, the Hungary Blue Trail, was established in 1938. After the Second World War, there was a big movement to reconnect with nature in Europe, and that resulted in the implementation of the Grand Randonnée, which are trails that first national trails that first appeared in Portugal, pardon, in France, but then they spread it out to Portugal, Spain, Luxembourg, Holland, Belgium, Italy, and eventually to the whole of Europe. As trails just began to appear everywhere in the US, the system became a little bit discoordinated, which prompted Congress to the US Congress to try and organize it in such a way that trails would not compete among them, but be complementary one to the other, and all work in the same direction, much like a road system, where roads have to in many ways they have to one complement the other. And in 1968 we have the American U.S. National Trail Systems Act enacted by Congress. As Europe starts to get more united after the war, and we get the European Union together, the trade organizations of Europe, they get together and they form the European Trails Association, which would later become the European Randonnée Federation. 12 international trails in Europe. After that, we see then trails springing up all over the world: Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Lebanon, Israel, Turkey, so on and so forth. And they also begin to arrive in our subcontinent, namely Latin America. Sendero de Chile and the Trilha Transcarioca or Transcarioca Trail are among the first, one in the late 90s and the other one in the year 2000. Then follow Huella Andina in Argentina, Waitakabuli Trail in the tiny island of Dominica in the Caribbean. After that, a culturally inspired movement rescues the Capacñan, which is also known for us less versed in the Spanish language as the Camino Inca, which becomes also is a World Heritage Site. It's one of the only two long distance trails in the world that are recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Sites, the other being the Camino de Santiago. And from there on, things speed up with the Camino de Costa Rica, Sendero del Pacifico in Costa Rica, the Trans-Panama Trail in Panama, the Brazilian Trails Network in Brazil, which today has 127 affiliate trails, and the Red Boliviana de Senderos, the Bolivian Trails Network, which is also striding very large steps in that Andean country. So as we all can see, it's a movement that is spreading and is quickly growing. Initially, as one can see, I'm sorry because I can't see my whole slides. I can only see half of it. So if I bear with you to have some patience. The concept, it first started with linear trails, like the Appalachian Trail, where you would begin at one point and then at another point far away from where you are. Then it multiplies like that, and soon you have in the US three long distance trails: the Continental Divide Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Appalachian Trail as the cherries on the American trails cake, which also makes up for inviting collectors to become three crowned hikers. That model is the model that is also first followed in Europe. Here is the National Blue Trail in Hungary, which also tend to be linear. However, as trails grow, the layout of them becomes for a non-looker, an outside onlooker, becomes more like a network of trails than a bunch of trails. And as a network, it needs to be organized. It needs minimum standards of implementation, minimum standards of signage, minimum standards of management, and it also calls for some sort of standardization of signs, as is the case in the US that adopts the diamond-shaped sign. So if you see a picture of a diamond-shaped trail, you might not know that trail is in Alabama. You may not even know that Alabama exists, but you're gonna know that is a trail in the US. As trails begin to grow, it's also soon perceived that long distance trails, they function very well as connectors to protected areas, to cultural sites, so on and so forth. But the majority of hikers really, we're talking here 80% plus of the public, they seldom hike more than 4 days at a time. So from a public policy per se, it makes more sense to have trails that span from a few hours to 4 days. And that's what ends up happening in Europe. As you have long distance trails being implemented, they weave an intricate, a very intricate network of trails where you can start out hiking on one long distance trail, then you jump into a connected trail and you get another long distance trail on the opposite direction you're coming, another connected trail, and you make up a loop. And with that, you have lots of advantages. The first is that you generate more income in economically depressed areas, mostly on the countryside. The second is that you connect more natural and protected areas, helping, therefore, to helping animals to move from green patches to green patches, and being a tool in trying to avoid the island, the isolation of protected areas, which is detrimental to conservation because it doesn't let the biological variety to vary and makes animals very prone to diseases like COVID, for instance. Uh, Therefore, the long distance trails they become pillars of a more intricate network that is set upon them as pillars. The model is the model in Europe. As you can see, all countries in Europe have adopted the model. Here we have Spain and Belgium, just for an example sake. And these trails, once, or these networks, these national networks, once they are weaved together, they give birth to an European long distance path network, which is known as the EPAFs, which consists of 12 European trails. The smallest one is 5,000 kilometers long. So it's longer than both the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail. And they give you the opportunity to hike for as long as South Portugal or Gibraltar to the northernmost point in Norway, crossing in the way 6 countries, 8 countries, 10 countries, depending of which of the European trails you choose. This intricate network of trails has helped, if we talk about diplomacy and peace building here, they have helped people to understand each other better. They gave a sense of Europe to the hiking community, which is a very large community in Europe. Just people who set out to hike a long distance trail outside of his or her own country every year is considered to be more than 30 million people. And it also has helped the integration of national economies, going towards the building of an Europe with a sense of Europe stronger, or at least going towards being as strong as a sense of one's nationality. So it's also a very strong tool for diplomacy. In parallel, you've had long distance trails happening in countries in Asia and Africa and the Oceania, like Lebanon, Israel, Nepal, Bhutan, Jordan, New Zealand. Australia has its own system of long distance trails with at least 15 of them. Here we show the Bibbulmun track and the Cape to Cape track in the state of Western Australia. And coming back to our continent, we see Canada stitching together existing trails with new trails, and which is also multimodal. It caters for hikers, cyclists, paddlers, horse riders, stitching together the Trans-Canada Trail, also known as the Grand Trail, which stitches in its route the International Appalachian Trail in Eastern Canada, the Bruce Trail in Ontario, and several other trails. It brings with itself a very interesting concept, which is which is applying to the terrain the concept of hike your own hike, which is you have in many different stages of the trail different options that you can follow. if you start in eastern Canada and you proceed towards northern Canada, northwestern Canada, you can choose if you go on the easternmost trail, in the westernmost trail, in the central trail, but they are all equally the Trans-Canada Trail, which might be strange for someone who is stuck to the Appalachian Trail concept that you have to follow that exact route and you can't skip any section. But this new concept, it caters for hike your own hike, but it also helps to uh, to uh, water more terrain in terms of economy, and it helps also to diminish the problem of overcrowding of trails. So if 2 or 3 or 4 different options are equally acceptable as the Trans-Canada Trail, you're going to spread hikers through a broader territory. You've seen that slide. And then if we look into our own territory, you're going to see that below Canada, so if you start in the Yukon Territory, or more precisely, if you begin in the Alaska Trail, then you can cross through 3 federal protected areas in Alaska into Kluane National Park in Canada. And then you can go down all the way to either the Pacific Crest Trail or via the Northwest Trail to the Continental Divide Trail. And then you can hike all the way south to Mexico, where you can connect either to Baja California, which has been already hiked end to end and mapped, and it's the prime hiking territory. Or you can also, if you choose going via the CDT, you can then connect with the old Royal Spanish Road that connects with the Natchez Trail and the CDT in the US, Texas, northwards, but it goes south all the way to Mexico City. From there to the projects that are being put in place in Costa Rica and Panama, there's, as far as today, there's no long distance trails, but there is a network of disconnected trails that take the hiker or biker, for that matter, into some of the most interesting territory in the world, which is the Maya territory, taking you to ancient Maya cities such as Tikal, El Mirador, Altunja, and all of them, and also through a network of volcanoes and volcanic lakes, which are stunning, as you have in Nicaragua, in Guatemala, and in El Salvador, as well as in Honduras. And all of these, although they do not exist as a coordinated project, they have been thought out in the Mesoamerican Trail project, and they have a diplomatic framework to be implemented, which is the CICA, the Central America Integration System, which is already framed by international treaties signed by all the Central American countries. Going south, as you know, and then Nat here can delve a little bit more deeply into that. Both Costa Rica and Panama are already implementing long distance trails that could be connected into the Pan-American network of trails. And then here I will propose that we don't think just linear. if we go back to the US system, we can start in Canada, as I told you, in Alaska, but we can also begin in Canada on the other side, at the tip of the International Appalachian Trail, which is on the Labrador Peninsula, coming down the island of Newfoundland, and then via the Parc National de la Gaspésie in Quebec, and then into the US, connecting with the Appalachian Trail, and from the Appalachian Trail into the Benton-MacKaye Trail, the Pinhoti Trail, and down into the Florida Trail and the Florida Keys Trail, which will leave you at the tip of the Northern Caribbean Sea. And then we can have two main Pan-American trails parallel, framing everything that is in between. Let's call one the Alaska Patagonia Trail and the other the Atlantic Seaboard Trail, which from Florida, we would encourage the hiker to island hop between Caribbean islands, doing their long distance trails, of which there are three very well established already. The Waitatubuli Trail in the island of Dominica with its 185 kilometers, and two GRs in the French territories of Martinique and Guadeloupe. I've lived in the Caribbean, and I can tell you that I personally have mapped also long distance trails in Grenada and in St. Vincent in the Grenadines, and also in Antigua. So there is a vast array of possibilities in the Caribbean for this island hopping. As you come down and from the Caribbean or from Panama, you're gonna reach Colombia or Venezuela, and there you should be able to connect both trails again in order to also give the hiker the possibility of hike his own hike. Or that is, you may have come from the Alaska Patagonia Trail and then decide to switch to the Atlantic Seaboard, or you may have come from the Caribbean and switch to the Pacific side of South America and go down the Carpathian. For people who don't know, probably pretty much everyone has heard of Machu Picchu. Well, Machu Picchu is one of not several, but very many historic sites that were connected by these intricate network of 30,000 kilometers of cobblestone roads, which is a more elaborate trail system than the Roman roads in Europe. And there is also a treaty between the 5 countries that are linked by these trails, namely Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina, 6 countries that is pushing for the rehabilitation of this network of trails, which in my opinion would be one of the more fascinating tracks on earth. I now live in Ecuador, and I've hiked 4,000 kilometers of these networks, and I can tell you, I find it very hard to believe that there is something more superb than the Inca trails. But if you choose going the Atlantic Seaboard, it's also very hard to beat, because then you're gonna go down Venezuela and you're gonna reach the incomparable tepuis, of which Mount Roraima is the king, and the Salto Angel with 1,000 meters difference between top and bottom, making it the highest waterfall in the world, both in Venezuela. As you keep coming down southern Brazil, you're gonna South America, you're gonna reach Brazil, either via Amapá in the coast, if you come via the Guianas, or via Roraima if you come via Venezuela. And then you're going to reach the Brazilian Trails Network, which is being implemented now. We have already 5,000 kilometers in place. And from there, you can work your way down, all the way down to Uruguay, or you can, again, move west through an old Indian way called the Peabiru, and from there, you're going to connect with Bolivia with Red Boliviana de Senderos, which is also being implemented very, very quickly in that Andean, but also Amazonic country. The Brazilian Trails Network is already very spread out. And now in the first Brazilian Congress of Trails in Goiânia, one of the things we're going to do is to put forward this concept of a Pan-American Trails Network, trying to make our trails coordinate, connect, and keep in the same spirit within a standard science. One of the trails that is unavoidable for a Pan-American Trail to happen is the Oiapoque Chuí Trail, which is almost 8,000 kilometers, linking both extremes of the Brazilian coast. And one of the things, in the spirit of having a network and not just linear trails, is can we dream of remaking Francisco de Orellana's way? Orellana was a Spaniard who came from Quito to the mouth of the Amazon in the year 1534, almost 400 years ago, 500 years ago. It's such an epic hike that it was only done again in 2019 by the Briton Ed Stafford. It seems impossible, it seems very hard, but we have already several trails, long distance trails being put alongside the Amazon River. So it's not too much to dream of a multimodal trail, water, bike, and hike, following the steps and the paddles of Orellana. Here we have, as I told you, the Caminho do Peabiru, which links Brazil to Cusco in Peru via the Bolivian Trails Network. Therefore, we have a possibility also of having, like the American Perimeter Trail, a South American Perimeter Trail. If you link the Capaquinhan with the Orellana Trail in the Amazon, going down Oiapoque Chuí, and then you get Peabiru, you're going to link history, the Andes, the Amazon, and the Atlantic rainforest and the Atlantic seaboard in Brazil in one of the most spectacular perimeter trails in the world, as you have the American Perimeter Trail, and using both the Amazon Trail as the Peabiru as transversal continental trails, as you have the American Discovery Trail in plan there. The idea is to have a multimodal long distance hike that would allow for different sorts of expeditionaries to do. That's pretty much what I had to say. Next Stream Shore is going to complement what I showed you in a way to show you that we're not just talking about a dream. Although it may seem like a dream and it may seem like a fiction, we do have in place some concrete steps to put it together. Please, next, I hand it over to you.
Sure. Well, thanks, Pedro. That's an amazing vision. And we only have about 10 minutes left. So what I would like to do is to focus on thinking about how we turn this vision into a reality. And there are two things that I would like to do. One is to look a little bit back at the history of the Appalachian Trail, to give us some, to learn a little bit how it was organized and started. And I also want to emphasize that this is a project, as Pedro has mentioned, of coordination and connection. We're not talking about building a new trail. And if we create an organization for this, we're really not talking about creating an overarching organization that creates this trail. There are existing trails and existing organizations, and this is a project of connection and coordination. And that's what's going to make it possible. And so just very quickly, thinking about the Appalachian Trail, people know that the vision of the trail started with Benton MacKaye. And he presented a series of papers in different forums. And this was the way the vision was initially put towards the trails community. It actually was based on a previous vision, which was from Vermont. So the first long trail was not the Appalachian Trail, it was the Long Trail of Vermont that went the entire length of Vermont. And Benton MacKaye actually first envisioned and dreamed of the Appalachian Trail when he was on Stratton Mountain in Vermont, looking across the ridges and imagining an Appalachian Trail. What was happening in the early part of the 20th century with trails at that time? There were many isolated trail systems in New England and in the Appalachian Mountains. And the Appalachian Mountain Club was one of the large clubs, but their trail systems were disconnected. You could not actually easily hike across the mountains. And there were also many smaller trail groups in different states in New England that had their own trail systems. And in 1916, a group of trails leaders from different trails clubs and groups came together to create what they called the New England Trail Conference in 1916. And the specific project that the New England Trail Conference took on was not only doing things like creating standards for signs, for trail maintenance, but also how do we connect our trails? How do we create a trail network, not just a long trail, but a trail network out of all of the trails in New England? And the Benton MacKaye made a series of presentations at the New England Trail Conference. And this is actually where the reality, it went from dream to reality, because what he did was he convinced other people in the trails community that initially saw his vision as a pipe dream, something that was not realistic. But gradually, through his discussions, through repeated iterations of the New England Trail Conference, he started to convince people. And the New England Trail Conference is the model for, it was created in 1916. In 1921 was when Benton MacKaye first proposed the Appalachian Trail idea in the conference. And then in 1925, the Appalachian Trail Conference was formed as modeled after the New England Trail Conference. The idea was that, again, it's a project of coordination and connection. And so of bringing together trail organizations across the Appalachian mountain chain. And so the important thing to understand here is that the conference, these series of conferences were absolutely critical in establishing the Appalachian Trail Conference. Now, people may be familiar that now the Appalachian Trail Conference is the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. So they maintain the letters, the ATC, but it essentially evolved from an annual conference. The reason I'm emphasizing this is because if this is a project, if to make this real is a project of coordination and connection, what we need to do is to meet and with those trails organizations from around the world that can be the pieces and the parts. And trail conferences are the way to do this. And so my proposal is, if we want to really move forward with this, that we form a Pan American Trails Network committee, and that committee is formed at the Brazil Brazilian Trails Congress. And that is our first effort to start talking about making this dream a reality and how to do it. Pedro and I have a World Trails Network America's board meeting tomorrow, and we can propose this also at that board meeting. So this conference in Brazil is going to be essential to getting this idea started. What I suggest is that afterwards, that there's a World Trails Conference in Skiathos, Greece. There may not be as much participation from America's Trails organizations, but nevertheless, I think we should have some sort of discussion at the World Trails Conference in September of this year, after the Trails Congress in Brazil, where we carry on the discussion. Then in April of 2023, we have an International Trails Symposium in Reno, Nevada, that's co-sponsored by the American Trails, the Trails Professional Association, and also the World Trails Network Hub for the Americas. And at that conference, we take the next step. We refocus on presentations where we can look at, how do we make this real? What are the organizational elements we need? And following that, in 2024, if all goes well, we will have a World Trails Conference in Costa Rica, back in the Americas, and that become another goal for us, to have yet another iteration of a plan for this trail. And as Pedro mentioned, the Mesoamerican Trail project is a well-developed proposal. It may need a little reviving. There hasn't been a lot of work on it recently, but there is a whole plan for a Mesoamerican Trails Network. And we can focus on that in part in 2024. So what I'm suggesting is that this is the way we can take the steps. We can move forward, form this working group, this committee for a Pan American Trail Network. And we can use these series of upcoming international trails conferences to move the project forward. And see if there was anything else I wanted to mention about that. Well, the only other thing I wanted to say is that, and this goes again back to the history of the Appalachian Trail, many people don't know that the Appalachian Trail, the way that Mackay conceived of it, is he called it a project, a series of recreational communities that would be connected by a walking trail. And he said it was the systematic development of outdoors community life. And then he called it a project of housing and community architecture. This is very foreign to the idea of many people who think of trails as simply, connecting protected areas or a wilderness experience. Part of the vision that Benton Mackay had was that this would also be part of an engine of economic development for the region. And there would be a series of, he had a vision of community, of recreational communities that were along the trail. When you look at projects like the Sendero, the Camino de Costa Rica, we're very much working on that principle of understanding that trails and trail networks, long trails and trail networks, distribute economic benefit as well as flow of recreation. The other thing that's really critical that Pedro mentioned is that at the same time that you're distributing this economic benefit, you're also connecting protected areas and potentially restoring, reforesting corridors between protected areas. And so it's also a project of conservation. And as Pedro mentioned, this is essential for the health of protected areas because they cannot exist in isolation. Fragmentation is one of the essential, critical problems of protection globally. So it's really important to see that this is a project of recreation, but it's a project of economic development that also is a project of conservation and ecological restoration. And we're at the end of time, Pedro, so I don't know.
I've talked to Jay, and I think we can go forward if people want to make questions or another 20 minutes or so.
Okay, well, I will stop talking and let's open this up. And for anybody that wants to stay on and discuss, please feel free to ask a question or make a comment.
Well, if I can say, I just wrote it because I thought we would be out of time, but I just want to really affirm the value of doing this. I think that I'm hoping that the 21st century will be the century of the Americas. And I think that strengthening the identity of trails in the Americas is its diplomatic value, its strengthening of the links between the nations of the Americas is really a worthy goals, and I think trails can contribute to that. And I just want to really praise Pedro and all the other people who have been involved in developing this concept. I also agree with Nat that the process of using conferences is a good way forward. And of course, the idea that you don't have to actually link geographically the trails, but develop a product, a conceptual strategic product of people hiking all through the Americas. And, you know, a simple idea is a kind of certificate like the Compostela certificate, that if you've hiked 300 kilometers and at least 20 of them is in North, Central, and South America, you get recognized as an American hiker, or, something like that would be something that would grab the tourist population. It's conceptually easy to understand, and that product added to the process of actually coming together as a consortium of trails in the America would be, I think, a powerful tool to get this going, this dream going. So.
Thanks, Conchita. Your idea is very constructive of starting to issue certificates even before the trail is all connected, because this is going to give strength to the process. I'd like to add, I'm a diplomat by trade for the Brazilian diplomatic service. And as diplomats, to reach the rank of ambassador, we have to present a thesis on the academic diplomatic when you reach the age of 40, 45. My thesis was about adjoining protected areas in different countries. And as I was studying for the thesis, the concept of a Pan-American Trail dawned to me, and it seemed possible. There are several international agreements in place that could facilitate that. So I agree with your idea. I hadn't thought of that, but let's incorporate it as of now. But the other thing that we should do is where we have more mature agreements, let's try to implement small tracts of international trails. I'm moving to the border of Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina now. I'm going to be consul general at the border. So it's one place where we can push that forward, because I'll have both the diplomatic leg and the technical leg. And so let's try to make a case out of it so other countries can follow. But I agree with Matt, we need to have a coordinating group as representative of the countries as possible, as soon as possible, and try and also reach out to governments. The United States, Forest Service, the Brazilian National Park Service, the Argentinian Protected Area Service, so on and so forth. This is a long project. We're probably all going to be dead before it's complete. But if we don't do our parts, our children and grandchildren will never see it, because it takes more than one person's lifetime. So we have to do our bit. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to give an update from Panama. Basically, that the Trans-Panama Trail, the route is defined, but it's not an ongoing project as of yet. What we do have is a project called 1,000 kilómetros de senderos, or 1,000 kilometers of trail. It's a national level project that is being implemented in coordination between the Tourism Authority and the Ministry of the Environment. I'm coordinating it, and we started it last year. And so the idea is to rehab 1,000 kilometers of terrestrial, aquatic trails all over the country. Not necessarily that they be contiguous. It's basically working at a smaller scale, rehabbing trails that already exist in protected areas, and creating routes between protected areas and communities, smaller ones, with the idea to scale up eventually and complete the Trans-Panama Trail. So that's an initiative that's starting and gaining quite a bit of momentum. And what we'd like to eventually establish is a Panamanian Trail Association or something of the likes that would be able to continue this project and mitigate any political fallout when administrations change. As we all know, projects that are at a government level are very vulnerable to that. So that's where we are in Panama, and it's great to hear about this, and I look forward to working with you all en que esto se vuelva una realidad. Saludos.
Let me share with you, Net, the chairperson of the Brazilian Trails Network, Mr. Hugo de Castro, and myself. We have scribbled down a few lines about the project, and it was published yesterday in Portuguese. It has been recently translated into English, and Net is trying to translate it in Spanish. As soon as it is translated, I bear with you to try and disseminate it as much as possible, because that's just a seed. It may turn out to be completely different than what is written there, but for a tree to grow, you need to plant the seeds, and spreading out the idea is fundamental. So once the article is in Spanish, please help us spreading it out. Back to you.
So just to say, I'm trying to pass it on to people like Conchita for the translation. No, I am trying to. We are looking for a translator, hopefully from Costa Rica, that can help. Actually, one comment I wanted to make was thinking, we've got Panama representatives from Panama, Adrian and Conchita from Costa Rica, and then Pedro's idea of these transnational trails. We have the La Amistad Peace Park in Panama and Costa Rica, but as far as I know, we don't go between. And I don't, that would be, what?
It's not even allowed. In Costa Rica, there's a rule that you have to come out the same entrance that you went into a national park. You can never go out another entrance. Even in Tapanti, we have 2 entrances. It would be ideal for us, and they don't let us.
So this is, I mean, obviously, this is one of the challenges we would have to trying to create this sort of international trail. But I'm just saying, there we have a international park, which I think is, you know, if we could take the next step and have an international trail, that would be interesting.
I think we need to have a plan. If we have a plan, then we can begin to picar y picar y picar.
Yes,
I think
yes.
a very compelling idea is the pre-Columbian trails, being able to build upon that, because it has an environmental, cultural, you know, something that that is just, again, very powerful for diplomatic purposes.
I have seen that we have here a Cesar from the Red Boliviana de Sendero. Would you like to talk, Cesar?
Well, first, congratulations, Pedro, for the presentation. I think that's the way to follow the new years in the next years. And I think that the conference, like Nat says, it will good steps to create more relations and based on confidence and relations with public and other actors. Well, in Bolivia, we have, and as Adrian says, the political situation is a limitation also is in Brazil, related to the governance and the projects when change from one government to the other, and the conflicts with political parties, it's difficult. So the strategy of the Bolivian Trails Network, inspired in the strategy that is adopted by the Brazilian Trail Network, is to try to create a bottom-up governance for the connectivity and the protected areas. Now in Bolivia, we're focused now in the tropical Andes, that is a critical ecosystem between the Andes and Amazonia. And in Bolivia is the region that the Carpathian trails, the pre-Columbian trails, are more preserved. So we are focusing in put the signals in these trails, but one of the difficulties is also the funding for that project. The major part is based on volunteers, and the government and the national protected area services is not at its best moment. The environmental ministry is very poor in governance. I think I could say that, but we're optimistic. We'll participate in the Brazilian Trails Network conference, and I'm very happy for this. This first is not the first meeting that we have. Had talked with Pedro, and he also said about his thesis. I have his book here. It's very inspirational for create the Latin American and Pan American network. So I'm hoping for the next steps. I hope that in May in Goiânia, it will be the first step to build or to create, like Ned said, the commission for the Pan American, and maybe that create a solid structure for governance and governance of the trails, and also to fertilize the protected areas around Latin America.
Matt? Anyone else wants to add some comment or
Comments or
should we-
thoughts?
Yeah, I just have a quick one, and then unfortunately I have to jump to another meeting. But I shared on the chat the Out of Eden walk. I'm not sure if anybody else here is following it right now, but it's a National Geographic project, and Paul Salopek has been walking the path of human migration across the planet. He's been at it for 7 years now, and he left Ethiopia, and he's now in Tibet. And sometime in the next 2 to 3 years, he's going to be walking down the coast from Alaska to Patagonia. So I think in that, I'm not sure of the exact timing, but I think there's an opportunity, if you'll excuse the expression, to piggyback on that expedition to be able to help build the trail system, and maybe some communication with the Out of Eden organization would be worthwhile before he gets too close.
Very good idea. Anybody else would like to add any comment?
Just in addition of the last comment that Stephen shared, I think that the strategy from Ushuaia to Alaska, from Patagonia to Alaska, is it's the best strategy. It's a consolidated route for backpackers, travelers. So I think that give a lot of attraction for the project. So I think in the next years will become a huge project, and we got everything. We got the information, the mystics from the past, the organizations, the people, and I'm very happy for this meeting and the next steps that will go follow.
Thank you, Cesar. I'll pass the floor to our chair in the World Trails Network Hub for the Americas to wrap up and show us how to hike forward.
Well, I guess first of all, I mean, thanks for everyone staying an extra 15 minutes. It was a good conversation, you know, and thank you for the presentation and the description of the Congress. So this is excellent. I think that I outlined what I propose as a way that I think we can move forward, and I do believe that having a session that's really focused on this discussion, Pan American Trail Network proposal at the Brazilian Trails Congress, is our first step, you know, and then from there we can discuss the next steps. And if it sounds like we have a solid enough group and we can carry on the discussion across the next international conferences as well as in between, then I think we're going to make progress. We can show something. So I'm feeling very excited based on this this conversation today.
All right, thank you. Unless anyone wants to make a last remark, I'll give you one, I'll give you two, I'll give you three. So let's wrap up, and let's all work together to make this dream a reality, if not for ourselves, at least for our children and grandchildren. Let's hike together towards Alaska for us who are down here, and towards Patagonia for you guys who are up there in barbaric lands.
All right. Well, goodbye, everybody.
Bye.